All right. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. We are so thrilled to have you here today. And just a few housekeeping details for those of you who just joined. We will, as you can tell, we're recording this webinar, so we will make this available to everyone who registered. We'll actually send out a link to the webinar and the recording itself, some follow-up resources. So no need to take notes with anything that's on screen. You'll get a copy of the recording and the slide deck, Betsy.
Uh,
Yay, nay, maybe. At least the recording, that I can
yes.
be sure of. So we'll send that out to you. The other thing I wanted to mention is this webinar kicks off our monthly series known as Fame's Financial Check-in with Fame. So I know most of you who've joined probably are aware of the full webinar series, but we just want you to know that every month, the first Friday actually of every month at noon, so it's a little bit different this month, but this is a special webinar. So I'm actually going to pop it in the chat right now so that you all have it. I'm going to send you the link to the series, which actually gives you all of the webinars that we're offering every month, the registration links. There's a lot of great resources and information that we'll be sharing on student loans, credit scores, financial wellness, financial aid, college savings, just a lot of great information available. So we hope that you'll check that out and register for future webinars. As we move through this webinar, we do want to take questions, so please, we encourage you to use the Q&A feature. Down at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little question mark with Q&A. We'll ask you to use that to ask questions, and as we move through the webinar, we'll pause our speaker and give an opportunity to ask questions. We would like you to avoid providing anything too detailed or personal in the Q&A, but certainly know that we have resources available. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. For those of you that I haven't met or you haven't heard from me before, my name is Mary Dyer, and I serve as Financial Education Programs Manager at the Finance Authority of Maine. I have many FAME staff who've joined either on screen or otherwise, have joined as attendees. Nikki Vachon, she's one of our college savings counselors. Mila Tappan, she's our manager of outreach and college savings, and Martha Johnston, our director of education. So we're all here today and we're thrilled to have you. Our speaker today, the ever popular federal student loan guru, Betsy Mayotte. We are so thrilled to have you here, Betsy. And Addison, who is also with the Institute for Student Loan Advisors, his screen isn't on, but he is in the background and will be answering your questions as we move through the webinar. So you've got a lot of support here today and some amazing experts. So before I introduce Betsy, I just want to give just a quick overview of some of the resources that FAME has to offer. And I'm actually going to ask Mila to pop a link in the chat to start with. We want you to know that we just recently launched a new federal student loan repayment webpage that is very focused on this moment in time that we're in terms of student loan payment repayment. Things have resumed. There's a lot of things action that we want borrowers to take. We know that you have a lot of questions, so we've included an FAQ. So I encourage you, you can actually visit famemain.com/repay and find all of our student loan repayment information. But again, Mila's going to pop the link in there, and we encourage you to start there. If you're really not sure where to begin, you're feeling overwhelmed, there's a lot of great information on the webpage. In addition to that, as I said, we're thrilled to have Betsy and her team here. Betsy is the president of the Institute for Student Loan Advisors, also known as TISLA. And so another resource that we want you to be aware of is that we partner with Betsy and her organization on a variety of webinars and topics. We meet with her on a regular basis to receive guidance and the latest updates regarding federal student loans. But we also partner with her counselors to provide you with free student loan advice. So we actually have a direct email address for FAME to Betsy's team. So you can actually reach out to her and the team at TISLA at FAME, and I'll have one of you, Nikki, Mila, whoever wants to sign up for it, put the link right in the chat as well. You can go to FAME at freestudentloanadvice.org, and that's where you can receive expert help with questions that you have related to your federal student loans. Really anything. Betsy and her team are available to help you. So we want you to be aware of that. And then last but not least, we also want you to know that we partner with ECMC Solutions and several colleges and universities across the state to provide proactive student loan counseling. So, borrowers of the University of Maine system, the Maine Community College system, we want you to know that ECMC, in order to support you when you enter repayment, and these are really the newer borrowers, those who've entered repayment, those that are being sort of the receiving the proactive outreach are borrowers who've entered repayment more recently. And so if you receive a phone call from ECMC Solutions, an email, any outreach, that is a partnership that we have established with them, and we want you to respond to that and take advantage of that. And we'll add some information in the chat as we go through. I'll add some additional links, some additional resources about that. So all that's to say that in addition to your student loan servicer, FAME, TISLA, ECMC, all of us are here to help to ensure your success as you enter repayment or continue repayment. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Betsy. I'm going to add some additional information in the chat. Any last questions or comments before we get started? All right, I'm going to turn it over to you, Betsy. You should have full control.
Thanks, Mary. I just want to clarify, Mary, I appreciate your confidence. She said you can ask about anything. I just want to clarify that my only superpower is student loans. So please don't ask questions about how to repair your transmission or tax questions or legal questions. Unfortunately, we got to stick to student loans. I'm a one-trick pony, which makes me very boring at parties. Um, so with that said, so the purpose of today's presentation, it's a little all over the place, only in that usually when we do a webinar, we pick a topic and that's what we talk about is that topic, maybe public service loan forgiveness or picking a repayment plan. The purpose of today's presentation is to address the current pain points. Um, for the first time in almost 5 years, there are people that are very close to defaulting on their student loans. So we want to address that. If you're one of those people, how to resolve it. If you are in default, how to ameliorate that. Another FAQ that we're getting a lot lately is around the safe forbearance, specifically how interest is going to start accruing for those on the safe forbearance starting tomorrow. Happy Friday. So we're going to talk about that. And so again, this presentation might seem a little disjointed that we're all over the place with topics, but what brings it all together is to try to address the pain points and not make them as owie as they might be now. So with that said, um, let's start at sort of the prep work. We get a lot of questions into the FAME inbox and just the general TISLA inbox. There's a remarkable number where the question is, all they say is, can you help me with my student loan? And our answer is always, well, yes, we'd sure like to try. Or the question might be, what payment plan should I pick? And that's all that's there. And we could definitely help with those things, but we need more information to be able to address those questions and provide the help that you need. And along the same vein, if you're struggling with your payments or if you're delinquent on your loans or if you're in default on your loans, there's sort of some prep work you need to do before you start thinking about what the best option is for you. So regardless of why you're here, all of you, when you sort of start thinking about your student loans and trying to solve whatever problem it is you're trying to solve, you all need to know this information. First of all, what type of student loan do you have? Is it a federal loan? Is it a private loan? Is it a state loan? Some people still have what we call institutional loans, which is money that's borrowed directly from your school, where the school is the lender. It's not as common as it used to be, but it does still happen. If you have a federal loan, what kind of federal loan is it? Is it a direct loan? Is it what we used to call, or what we still call the FFEL loan program, which is Federal Family Education Loan Program? Is it a Perkins loan? If you're not sure, where to go is studentaid.gov, which is the Department of Education's website. Now, I'm going to say that website about 20 times on this presentation because, and it should be someplace that you bookmark because there's a lot of really valuable tools there. Um, studentaid.gov is not where you're going to manage most of your loan. You still have a loan servicer. But if you're not sure who your servicer is, or you don't know your login, studentaid.gov is the place to go for that information. It's also important for you to know how much do you owe in each of your loan types. When was the first disbursement of the oldest loan? Now that might seem like an oddly specific question, but especially when you're talking about payment plans and other benefits, your eligibility for those plans and benefits may very well be anchored to how old your oldest loan was. So, for example, there's a plan called New IBR, and in order to qualify for that plan, you have to have a direct loan. You could not have had a direct loan that was taken out prior to July 1st, 2014. So when you're doing your prep work while you're in studentaid.gov, take a peek at the loan details and see what the first disbursement is of your oldest loan and write that down. So if the question comes up, you have it in front of you. Also, are they Stafford loans? Are they Parent Plus loans? Is it a consolidated loan? All those things are things you should be writing down as part of your prep work. Um, who is the loan servicer? What status is the loan in? Is the loan in forbearance? Is it past due? Is it in default? There's a very distinct difference in the federal student loan program between a loan that is delinquent or past due versus in default. Now, a loan that's in default is technically also past due, but a loan that's past due isn't necessarily in default. And your eligibility for certain plans and the consequences are very different whether you're in default or not. Now, if you're not sure if you're in default, again, logging into studentaid.gov is the first thing to do, and then you'll know. If you are actually in default versus just being past due, it'll be there in big red letters. There will be no question as to whether you're in default or not if you are in default. So again, regardless of why you're here, anytime you start thinking about your student loans, that's the key information that you should be prepping and having in front of you before you start looking at your options or asking questions. All right, so let's talk about student loan delinquency. Now, federal student loans were paused from March of 2020 until the fall of 2023. No federal loans were due for payments during that period, and people enjoyed a 0% interest rate. And then from the fall of 2023 until the fall of 2024, we had what was called the on-ramp period. So people were due for payments at that point, but the Department of Education recognized that after such a long pause, a lot of things might cause people to go delinquent. Maybe they moved and forgot to update their loan service or their address, so they didn't know that their loans were coming due again. Maybe they didn't realize that they could apply for a lower payment option or they couldn't afford the payment that they had prior to COVID. For whatever reason, the government realized that we needed a minute to sort of get back in the swing of things when it came to student loan repayment. So this year-long on-ramp period meant, yep, you're due for payment, most likely, unless you had some other event going on that deferred your loans. But if you do go delinquent, we're not going to report you to the credit bureau and we're not going to let you default. So essentially what they did is anybody who got to like the 90-day past due mark, which is, as you'll see, generally when it starts affecting your credit negatively, they were giving those borrowers what we call administrative forbearance. And to make sure that it didn't hit your credit during the on-ramp period and make sure that you didn't progress to 270 days delinquent, which is when loans would default. Now, that on-ramp period ended in the fall of 2024, which meant that the first time that borrowers could potentially start seeing a non-defaulted loan negatively affect their credit would have been this past January. It also means that this month is the first time people might actually be hitting the 270-day past due mark, which is when you really have to start. It's 270 days is legally in default on a federal student loan. But as you'll see, if you're at 270, you still have a chance to sort of pull things back before the really bad things start to happen, that can happen with a defaulted student loan. So, how to tell the difference of whether your loan's actually in default or not in default? A loan that's not in default is less than 270 days past due, and you can see how many days past due you are by logging into your loan servicer's website. Now, the reason you can't really see how far past due you are unless you're actually in default on studentaid.gov is because the studentaid.gov website is not real time. The servicers update it every few weeks, sometimes once a month at the least. So the FSA website is not real time. You need to go to your servicer's website to actually see how many days past due you are. But a loan that's less than 270 days past due, a loan that's either in forbearance, regardless of what kind of forbearance it is, or deferment, regardless of what kind of deferment it is, a loan that's showing in an actual repayment plan, such as SAVE or IBR, ICR, or graduated or extended. Um, if your loan's in any of those statuses, it is not in default. Now, if your loan is 90 days past due or more, then you it will be reported to the credit bureaus as a negative reporting that will hurt your credit. Now loans that aren't in default are still eligible for things like deferments, forbearances, lower payment options. And you can apply for those without bringing the account current, if you need to. People that are past due on their loans but not yet in default are also eligible for additional financial aid. Like if you're, so say you're 80 days past due today and you're returning to school in the fall, you're still going to be eligible for additional financial aid. I still strongly advise that you resolve it before it negatively affects your credit even more. And so you don't risk defaulting before that aid is awarded and then you can't get the aid. But if you're below day 270, then you are still eligible for additional financial aid. Now, a loan that's actually considered in default shows a status of default. As I mentioned earlier, if you log on to studentaid.gov, you'll know it's in big red letters and there's exclamation points littered about the website if you're in default. Defaulted loans are not eligible for most deferments, forbearances, loan forgiveness, or any lower payment options. There are some exceptions to that. For example, a loan that's in default would be eligible if the borrower was eligible for a disability discharge, or if the borrower should pass away, the loan would still be eligible for discharge in that scenario. But a defaulted loan is not eligible for public service loan forgiveness, for example, teacher loan forgiveness. It can't accrue payments towards those forgiveness programs. It's not eligible for income-driven plans, etc. And a loan that's in default, that borrower is not eligible for future financial aid unless and until they resolve that default. Now, federal student loans are kind of a unique animal when you compare it to other types of consumer credit. Most other types of consumer credit consider you in default sometimes the day after you miss a payment. Sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 60 days. And that includes private student loans. Um, as you saw, federal student loans actually aren't considered in default until day 270. And there are different stages of delinquency along the way and different activities that happen depending on how far past due you are. So just to give you an idea of what to expect. If you're between days 1 and 15 past due, you can expect to get a letter in the mail going, hey, um, you might have forgotten to make your student loan payment. You probably want to go ahead and do that. Here are some options if you can't afford it. Don't let it go much further or bad things can happen. Um, Between days 16 and 180 of the delinquency, they're going to start calling you, and you're going to get some additional notifications with increased urgency and for want of a better word, what might appear to be more threatening language. Um, and, I don't like to call it threatening language, more as cautionary language, because, again, once you're 90 days past due or more, it is negatively affecting your credit. And you're getting closer to day 270 when the really bad things can happen. Between days 181 and 270, there'll be additional phone attempts to reach you to try to help you figure out a way to get out of delinquency and not default on your loans. They'll send additional mail and emails. If they're having trouble reaching you, maybe the phone number is no good anymore, or they get returned mail. They will be reaching out. If you're delinquent, they'll be reaching out to the references that you put on your promissory note. And they might even do skip tracing towards your employer to try to be able to get a hold of you. And then at day 241, they're going to send the really ugly letter, which is that you are in imminent danger of default. There's bold and all kinds of very firm language in that letter. And it's called the final demand letter that says, if you don't resolve this in the next 30 days, one of the things the letter is going to say is that you're due the entire amount of the loan in full and immediately. Because when you default, remember, you have broken the terms of your agreement on your prom note, and therefore sort of all bets are off. You aren't eligible for any payment plan, and technically the loan is due in full. Um, and that final demand letter is going to say that. Now, here are some proactive steps to avoid default. Whether you're delinquent now and not yet in default, or if you're not going to be able to afford your payment, a payment that's coming, and you're nervous that you are going to go delinquent on the loan. Now, if you are delinquent, there's several ways to resolve that delinquency. The sort of low-hanging fruit one is to make payments. However, I find most people that are delinquent on their loans are delinquent not because they can't, if they could have afforded to make the payments, they wouldn't be delinquent in the first place. But if that's not the case, if it just sort of was out of sight, out of mind, and you have the money, you can certainly make the payments to reduce the delinquency, or get the loan out of a delinquency status. If you're eligible, you can also apply for deferments. Now, deferments can be applied retroactively as well as prospectively, and there's many reasons you could get a deferment. If you're in school at least half time, if you're unemployed and actively seeking full-time work, and by unemployed, I mean working less than 30 hours a week, as long as you are actively seeking full-time work. If you're in some sort of job rehabilitation program, you can get a deferment for that. If you're in the Peace Corps, or if you're receiving some sort of federal or state benefit that's based on being low income, such as food stamps, for example, you can get a deferment for that. One thing to know about deferments is, again, they can be processed retroactively if you were eligible for the deferment during the delinquency period. And then, of course, it can be used to further postpone payments for a period of time. Interest still accrues on any loan that you have that's not a subsidized Stafford loan, and you can choose to pay that interest while you're in deferment, or you may choose not to. Any outstanding interest at the end of that deferment will be capitalized or added on to your principal balance, which means that future interest that'll accrue will accrue off of that larger balance. So that's one thing to be aware of with a deferment. You can also request a forbearance. Forbearance is another way to postpone payments. It can also be applied retroactively to the account to resolve a delinquency as long as you're not in default. Um, Reasons for forbearance are a little more loosey-goosey. It's more of a general financial hardship scenario. And to apply for a forbearance, you would call your servicer and explain your situation. They usually don't ask you to submit any type of proof of anything, and they could often process it right over the phone. Deferments, on the other hand, you do need to fill out a form. Other than an in-school deferment, there is a form you'll need to fill out, and there may be some additional proof you need to submit depending on which deferment you're applying for. To obtain the form for the deferment, you can get it from your services website or studentaid.gov. You can also apply for a new repayment option. if you're delinquent. And if you apply for that repayment option, they will use what we call administrative forbearance to bring your account current before they get you started on the new repayment option. So these are all ways to lower or remove the account from a delinquent status. Now, keep in mind, as I mentioned a few times already, if the loan reaches 90 days past due or more, they will negatively report it to the credit bureau. Now, once you bring the account current, your credit report will reflect that the account is now current. However, that 90-day delinquency is still going to show up in the history of your credit report and will still affect your credit score for 7 years. A lot of people get confused by that. They say, well, wait a minute. I was 90 days plus past due, but then I made all those payments. Why don't they remove the 90-day mark? Well, your credit report is tracking your credit history. And the fact that you brought it current is reflected, but they still have to reflect the fact that at one point you were 90 days or more past due. There's very few situations where they will remove the negative reporting like it was never there. Now, ironically, there is a situation where you can get the default line removed from your credit bureau, and the default line is a much bigger whammy to your credit score than a 90-day delinquency is. But we'll talk about the way to do that in a few minutes. All right. There's sort of three stages of delinquency. There's being between 1 day delinquent and 269 days delinquent. And if you're in that status, all the options that I explained on the prior slide are potentially available to you, assuming you meet the other eligibility criteria. Once you hit day 270, legally, under the law, you are considered in default. However, the analogy I like to use is if you're delinquent, you're approaching the edge of the cliff. If you're 270, and there's still the opportunity to back up, and you back up with payments, deferments, forbearances, applying for a lower payment option. When you reach day 270, you have fallen off the cliff. However, there's still an opportunity for someone that has go-go gadget arms, and I probably just dated myself for using that reference. My apologies for the younger people in the audience that have no idea what that means, but I would recommend you Google go-go gadget arms. Anyway, when you reach day 270, you've fallen off the cliff. So you're no longer eligible to resolve the delinquency with deferments, forbearances, or lower payment options. But there is still the ability for someone to use their go-go gadget arms to reach over the cliff and grab you by the scruff of the neck and pull you back before you hit the ground. The way to do that is you can call and you can ask for a specific forbearance. They'll only give you that forbearance for 3 months, and it's retroactive. So essentially, that forbearance will bring you from day 270 to day, my math is terrible, um, minus 90 days to day 190. Jeepers, I hope my math is right. Sorry about that. Brings you below day 270 and gives you a little bit of breathing room to resolve the delinquency permanently through payment or lower payment option or deferment or whatever it is. Um, you can't get a lower payment option unless you do that or unless you make payments to bring yourself below day 270. And sorry, it's not a 90-day forbearance, it's a 120-day forbearance that they'll give you. And again, it'll give you a little bit of breathing room. That 120-day forbearance, if you ask for that and they give it to you and then you don't do anything and all of a sudden you're back at day 270 again, they will not give you that 120-day forbearance again. They will not give them that Hail Mary cannot be requested back to back. Now, where you're going to hit the ground and where those go-go gadget arms are not going to be able to save you anymore is when the loan actually transfers from your loan servicer to the Department of Education's default management and collections default management. I don't know where my mouth is today. It's not working. Um, DRG, Default Resolution Group at the Department of Education. Once the loan transfers over there, which generally happens between day 330 and 360, but honestly, it could technically happen at any time. It could happen at day 271. So even if your middle name is Danger, if you hit day 270, you need to be making that phone call today. Um, but it most of the time they don't transfer over to DRG until between days 330 and 360. And at that point, you can't make payments to resolve it, sort of to get pulled back over the edge of the cliff. You can't ask for that forbearance and so on. You are in default, and they are going to start doing what we call involuntary collections on your account. Now, I know I said that was it, but there is actually, you do still have a little bit of a window to prevent wage garnishment and to prevent the default being reported as a default on your credit report. And I'm going to cover that when I actually get to the default section of this presentation. But before I do that, I'm going to take a breath and a sip and check in with my friend Addison and see if there's any questions about any of the content we've covered so far that might be good to address with the whole group.
Hi there, Betsy. Um, we have been getting a bunch of questions about the save plan and what's going on with that, but I'm pretty sure you'll be addressing that later, so we can get
Yep.
into that at that point.
Yep, I am going to address that with gusto and detail once we get through sort of the what happens if you're in delinquency and default section. All right. So I've talked a lot about switching payment plans if you can't afford it and so on. I want to briefly, you know, repayment plans are a presentation all in and of itself. So I'm not going to be able to go into any gory detail about that, but I do want to sort of give a little bit of guidance on choosing the right repayment plan and what payment plans are available to you. Now, listen, the name of the game is paying the least amount over time. Now, whether if you're pursuing something like public service loan forgiveness, or if you owe a lot and your income is a little, you might be pursuing forgiveness under the income driven plans. But most people are going to end up paying their loans in full themselves. So, you need to find the balance by finding a monthly payment that's affordable, that allows you to also pay your other bills and, eat. Um, but also, the faster you pay your loans off, the less money you're going to spend in interest, the less your loan's going to cost you. So again, the name of the game is paying the least amount over time. And if you're pursuing loan forgiveness, you want to find the lowest payment plan that's eligible for the forgiveness program you're pursuing. If you're not pursuing forgiveness, for some people pursuing forgiveness may cost them more, especially if they don't owe a lot of money compared to what their income is. And in that case, you do want to pay as aggressively as possible. Now, the repayment plans that are available to current borrowers, people that have loans out today, are the what we call old IBR, which stands for income-based repayment, new IBR, starting in July of 2026. People with loans today, unless it's a Parent Plus loan, unfortunately, are going to be eligible for the new income-driven plan that is being developed as a result of the recent budget reconciliation bill. That new payment plan is called the Repayment Assistance Plan, or the RAP. I'm going to go over it really briefly in a second. Um, that's not going to be available to July of 2026. The pay-as-you-earn plan is still available. That and income contingent repayment are being sunsetted in July of 2028. So you can still get on those two plans, but you will be forced to pick a new plan if you haven't already by July of 2028. Existing borrowers can also still get the 10-year standard plan. If they consolidate their loans, they can get the standard consolidation plan. Graduated repayment, which is interest only for a couple of years, then the payment gradually goes up over the remaining 8 years. Extended repayment is if you owe at least 30 grand in loans. Instead of having 10 years to pay the loan off, you have 25, and your payment gets lowered to an amount that's going to be the same for every month for those 25 years. Now, Parent Plus borrowers are not eligible for any of the income-driven plans unless they consolidate. If they consolidate and they do it before July 1st, 2026, they can get on what's called income contingent repayment. And if they do that, then then they can stay on ICR, and come 2028, they will become eligible for income-based repayment. They'll be grandfathered in to income-based repayment. So if you have Parent Plus loans, I strongly advise you to consolidate before July 1st, 2026 and get on income contingent repayment, even if you don't need it now, in case there's a financial crisis in the future, so you can maintain your eligibility for at least one income-driven plan in the future. Now, there's also a loophole for Parent Plus loans called the double consolidation loophole, and we used to hype it up all the time. We still do to some extent. Double consolidation is still available, but you have to get it done by July 1st, 2026, and that will make you eligible for not only ICR, but pay as you earn and IBR now, rather than having to wait until 2028 when they grandfather you into it. Now, if you consolidate, whether you're a Parent Plus borrower or anybody else, if you consolidate or take out a new loan on or after July 1st, 2026, you have contaminated all your existing loans. And now you're not eligible for anything that you see in front of you except the new RAP plan that won't be available till July of 2026 and the new standard plan, which I'm going to go over in a minute. So that's something really important to consider. Now, unless you have Parent Plus loans, or maybe if you have old FFEL loans or Perkins, most people today, there's no value in consolidating. But if you are going to consolidate, you don't want to lose eligibility for these other plans, you definitely want to do it before July 1st, 2026. And if you are still in school, or if you plan on going back to school, or if you're a parent with Parent Plus borrowers who have children that are still in school, or younger kiddos that are going to be going to school after July 1st, 2026, that's something you're going to want to really think about. One sort of loophole for the Parent Plus borrowers is that if you already have Parent Plus loans and you really need access to those income-driven plans, but you still are going to have to borrow Parent Plus after July of 2026, have the other parent take out the post-July 2026 loans. And then you won't contaminate the loans that you already have, the Parent Plus loans that you already have. Now, the new Parent Plus loans that the other parent borrows will only have access to the standard repayment plan because they aren't making the RAP plan available to Parent Plus borrowers at all, which I think is awful and is going to cause a lot of future Parent Plus borrowers, I'm afraid, to go delinquent or even default. But that's a presentation for another day. But anyway, I'm going to say this a few times. If you have loans today and you borrow or consolidate on or after July 1st, 2026, it's going to contaminate your existing loans. What it won't do is if you already have progress towards loan forgiveness under PSLF or the other income-driven plans, borrowing after July 1st, 2026 won't reset that at all, but you won't be able to do IBR or pay as you earn or ICR or graduated or extended or any of those. Well, how do we get this question all day, every day? How do I know what my lowest payment is going to be? Well, the best thing to do is to go to studentaid.gov and use the loan simulator tool. And that'll show you not only what your monthly payment will be under all the plans that you're eligible for, but more importantly, it's going to show you how much those plans are going to cost you over time. And remember, that's the name of the game. How much is this going to cost me in the long run? But just as a general rule, if your income is higher than what you owe in student loans, it's likely going to be either the graduated or extended repayment plan that's going to give you the lowest monthly payment. However, if you're trying to qualify for public service loan forgiveness or forgiveness under the income-driven plans, and again, your income is higher than what you owe, then you need to get on income contingent repayment. In the fairly near future, you might also be able to choose income-based repayment, but even in that scenario, ICR might still be the lowest payment for you. When everything is updated with the new rules for budget reconciliation, again, the loan simulator tool will be your best bet to figure out which of those plans is the least. Now, if you have no loans prior to July 2014, your lowest payment is likely going to be under what we call new IBR. Now, if you have a consolidation loan that was made after July 2014, but it's made up of loans that were taken out before July 2014, you're not eligible for new IBR. It's only if you had no loans taken out prior to 2014 at all. If you do have loans older than 2014, but none of them were older than October of 07, then pay as you earn is likely going to be the lowest payment for you. If you have loans older than 2007 or you have FFEL loans, old IBR is probably going to be the lowest payment for you. If you have Parent Plus loans that aren't consolidated, the lowest payment is going to be the graduated repayment plan. If you have Parent Plus loans that are consolidated and your income is low compared to what you owe, as I mentioned before, you're going to want to use income contingent repayment, or if you're double consolidated, the first 4 rules that I mentioned apply. Now, if your head's spinning, use the loan simulator, because that applies all of these rules. But just generally as a rule of thumb, if someone says, what's the lowest payment amount for me? And they aren't able to tell me much about their loans, these are the general rule of thumbs for picking what the lowest payment option is. All right. If you take out loans on or after July 1st, 2026, these are the repayment plans that you're going to be eligible for. There will be 2. There will be the new standard plan. So right now, if you take out a loan and don't actively choose another plan, they put you on the 10-year standard plan. And that's where you have the same payment amount every month for 120 months. Or if you don't owe very much to begin with, the payment's at least $50 a month. They're not going to drag it out. They're not going to drag a $3,000 loan out for 10 years. You'll pay $50 a month until it's paid off. If you take out loans on or after July 1, 2026, the standard plan will depend on how much you owe in total. If you owe less than 25 grand, it'll be 10 years. If you owe between 50 and 100 grand, it'll be 20 years. If you owe north of 100 grand, it'll be 25 years. Same payment every month. The other option you'll have is the new repayment assistance program, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. Now, as I mentioned, Parent Plus loans will anybody who borrows on or after July 1st, 2026, their Parent Plus loans, even if they're loans that already exist today, will be contaminated and they'll only have access to the standard repayment plan. So parents, if you have to borrow in the future, you need to do the math now. How much total are you going to end up borrowing? And are you going to be able to afford whatever the standard plan is going to be? Because you are going to have no other options. In that respect, it's going to make parent loans not a lot different than private, as far as repayment options go. Now, with that said, federal loans, even Parent Plus, even future Parent Plus, still have safety nets that private loans don't have, such as disability discharge and so on. So I still would always recommend a federal loan over a private. But as far as repayment options go, for a future Parent Plus borrowing, that's something to be aware of. All right, the new RAP program. The payment is based on income, and what your payment is if you look at the bullet points on the slide in front of you, that's how you can calculate. You could do it right now on your calculator in front of you and estimate what your payment would be on the RAP. So it has nothing to do with your loan balance. It has everything to do with your adjusted gross income. So if your adjusted gross income for the year is 10 grand or less, your payment's going to be $120 for the year. So divide that by 12, means your payment's going to be 10 bucks a month. There's no $0 payments on the RAP like there is currently for the other income-driven plans if your income is low enough. If your AGI is between 10 and 20 grand, they're going to use 1% of your AGI. Divide that by 12. That's your monthly payment. If your AGI is between 20 and 30 grand, they're going to use 2% of your AGI. Divide that by 12. That's your monthly payment. And so on and so forth. It maxes out is if your AGI is over 100,000, in which case they're going to use 10% of your AGI. Once again, divide by 12, that's your monthly payment amount. If you have dependent children, you can from the monthly payment amount, and this aspect of it, I am 95% sure. The language in the bill is a little wonky here, so I'm only 95% sure that this is going to be $50 a month that you subtract and not $50 a year per dependent student. But most people seem to think it means $50 a month. So for every child that you have, you could subtract $50 a month from whatever you came out with for a monthly payment. So if your payment is $10 a month and you have 2 children, your payment's still going to be $10 a month because they won't give you a payment less than $10. But if your payment's $300 a month and you have 2 children, you subtract the $50 per child, your payment's really only going to be $200 a month. Now, if your payment, your billed payment, doesn't pay off all the interest that accrued that month, the government's going to forgive the rest of that interest. So your balance never going to go up under the RAP plan, which is awesome. The other thing, which is kind of awesome, is that if your monthly payment amount doesn't reduce your principal balance by at least $50, the government will make up the difference. Now, that's the other piece that's a little gray, the way the bill is written. I read it as that no matter what, your principal balance is going to go down by $50 every month, but I'm only 80% sure of that read. Maybe 90% sure of that read. It's possible that it could be interpreted to mean that if your payment only took $10 off the principal, that the government would match it another 10, so your principal would go down by $20 to a maximum of 50. Those are the two ways I've seen people read it. And honestly, the second way was the way I was originally reading it. But now I'm reading it as your principal will go down by $50 no matter what. So that's another awesome thing about the RAP. So regardless of what your payment amount is, not only will you not see your balance go up, your balance will still go down every month, even if you have an incredibly low payment. There is a forgiveness component to the RAP, but it's after 30 years. So if you're on the RAP program for 30 years and you still have a balance, they'll forgive it. Now that 30 years cross-pollinates with the existing income-driven plans. So if you end up switching over from, say, IBR to the RAP, and under IBR you already had 20 years under your belt, you'd only have to pay another 10 under the RAP to get that forgiveness. The RAP also will count for PSLF, but one thing they snuck in there that doesn't apply right now is in order for a payment to count towards the RAP or for an RAP payment to count for PSLF, it has to be on time. Right now, if the payment's delinquent, as long as you make it, they'll still count. They'll still count it towards forgiveness. But if it's delinquent, they will not. And that's written under the law. So just to give you an idea of how the RAP compares to the existing plans. Now, this particular chart, which I did not create, I have to give credit to the Urban Institute for this. This includes the SAVE plan. You'll notice I haven't talked about the SAVE plan. The SAVE plan is dead. Congress killed it, but even if Congress hadn't, the courts had shot it fatally. So the SAVE plan was gone no matter what. But if you compare the RAP to the other income-driven plans, you'll see that for people that make whose AGI is less than 80 grand, the RAP is actually going to cost you the same monthly as the other plans. It's not unless you were someone who had a $0 payment. $0 payment won't exist under the RAP. Your payment will be $10 a month. But if your AGI is 70 grand, the RAP is going to be cheaper for you than income-based repayment. It's only when you get to the over 80 grand AGI, that the RAP becomes more expensive than the existing income-based repayment plans. One thing I forgot to mention, if you're married and you file your taxes jointly with your spouse, under all these income-driven plans, they are going to use both incomes when they calculate your payment. And there's no way around that. Other than filing your taxes as married, filing separately. Now, doing that, just to warn you, you may miss out on some marriage tax credits. But if you file your taxes as married, filing separately, they will only look at your income rather than both you and your spouse's income. If you happen to live in a community property state, if you file separately, the AGI is half of the total income of the two of you. All right, before I jump into the save stuff, I'm going to check in with Addison again to see if there's any questions about anything that I've covered so far.
No, not at this time, but I have a feeling that they're going to come fast and furious after this next section.
Okay, I do too. All right, I think the number one question we're getting over the past couple of weeks is, I'm in the save forbearance. What do I do? People are especially nervous because, as I mentioned earlier, interest starts accruing for people on the safe forbearance starting tomorrow. A little bit of background on that. This would have happened regardless of the administration. This has everything to do with the SAVE litigation. Doesn't have anything to do with the budget bill. This isn't due to an executive order. And quite frankly, the Secretary of Education had no choice in the matter. Federal law requires the Secretary of Education to charge interest on student loans, except for very rare situations. Forbearance is never one of those situations. Now, the COVID period created legislation that temporarily allowed the Secretary of Education to do things that were contrary to federal law. But that period of time is over. To add to that, the last injunction that came, or it actually might have been the next to last injunction that came out as a result of the litigation around the SAVE plan, the injunction specifically said that the department was no longer allowed to forgive interest. So that's my long-winded way of saying I'm actually surprised they didn't start charging interest before this. Do I like it? Of course not. I wish nobody had to pay interest on their student loans. But I'm trying to explain why it's happening, um, because I think people think it's coming from a political place. And there are things that are happening that are coming from a political place, but the charging of interest starting tomorrow on the safe forbearance actually, believe it or not, does not happen to be one of those things. Now, with that said, the forbearance still exists, so you're still not required to make payments. We don't know how long the safe forbearance is going to last. Do I think it's going to last until 2028 when they're phasing out those other income-driven plans? No, I don't. It's not impossible that it'll last till 2028, but I would be shocked. Personally, if I was a betting woman, I think at most people have another year left under the SAFE plan. We might have a better sense of when that safe forbearance is going to end and people will be forced to choose another plan next week because there's another hearing around the SAVE litigation on August 4th. So we might have a better sense. But I think people are going to start getting an end date, an announcement from the Department of Education of when the SAVE forbearance is going to end sometime this fall, no later than this time next year. Um, If by chance the safe forbearance still is pending as of July 2028, or you're on ICR, or you're on pay as you earn as of July 2028, and you haven't actively chosen another plan, you will be put automatically on the RAP plan if they're able to. And if you're eligible. So, for example, Parent Plus loans won't be put on the RAP because they won't be eligible, including consolidated Parent Plus loans. If they can't put you on that, they're going to put you on the standard plan. Um, if as to what you should do if you're on the safe forbearance, that really depends. If you're pursuing PSLF, the safe forbearance period doesn't count for PSLF. So at this point, you can either choose to ride out the safe forbearance and plan on using what we call buyback to get those months to count, or you could switch plans now. It's probably going to cost you the same either way. What buyback is once you have certified 120 months of eligible employment under PSLF, you submit to the department and go, hey, remember that period of time where I wasn't making payments because I was in the safe forbearance or because I was in, say, unemployment deferment? How much would I have been paying if I'd actually been on an income-driven plan? And you're gonna have to submit proof of income of whatever your income was at the time that you're trying to buy back. They're going to do the math and they're going to send you a bill saying if you had made payments under the next lowest income driven plan during the, say, 12 months you were in the safe forbearance, you would have paid $300 a month. So you would have paid $3,600. If you send us $3,600 now, all in one fell swoop, we will give you credit for those 12 safe forbearance months. We're going to pretend you made the $300 payment every month under instead of being on the safe forbearance. So a lot of people on PSLF are choosing to switch now because they don't like the idea of having to make a big lump sum payment. Now, if your payment would have been zero under the next lowest income driven plan other than save, then it doesn't matter whether you switch plans now or ride out the save forbearance because it's not going to cost you anything. The other reason people pursuing PSLF though are switching now is also so they could start seeing their PSLF counts start going up rather than sort of waiting and nail biting for this buyback offer that they can't take advantage of maybe for a couple years down the line anyway. So if you're someone who's in the safe forbearance who's not pursuing PSLF, but is pursuing forgiveness under the income driven plans, I suggest you switch plans now because the save plan does not count for towards IDR forgiveness and there's no way to make it count. Now, with that said, there is a tiny sliver of a possibility that the outcome of the save forbearance court case might say, what the heck, we're going to give people IDR credit for the save forbearance anyway. I just don't think the court does not seem inclined to do that. So, I mean, you need to take the information that you have in front of you and make the best decision that you have. But I personally think the chances are very, very low that that safe forbearance is going to end up counting towards income-driven plan forgiveness. So I am recommending that people that are pursuing that forgiveness switch to another income-driven plan now so they could continue to accrue payments towards IDR forgiveness. Now, if you're someone in the safe forbearance and you just can't afford to get on any plan right now, and you aren't pursuing forgiveness, you might as well ride out the safe forbearance. It's better than getting on a plan you can't afford and going delinquent. However, if you can, I would try to at least pay the interest during the forbearance. While interest doesn't capitalize at the end of a forbearance anymore, you will have a big chunk of interest you'll have to pay off at the end of the forbearance before you can start attacking the principal. So that's another scenario to consider. Um, if you're pursuing forgiveness of any kind, PSLF, income-driven plan, maybe you're doing bar defense discharge or something, you should not be paying a penny while in this safe forbearance. It's essentially throwing money away because it's not ever going to count towards any type of forgiveness. And if you're going to get your loans forgiven, then they're going to forgive the remaining balance anyway. So you don't care about the extra accruing interest if you're going to end up with loan forgiveness anyway. So please do not make payments during the safe forbearance if you are pursuing loan forgiveness. A more delicious way to throw your money away would be to take it outside, light it on fire, and toast a marshmallow over it. Okay. If you do default on your loans, and I know we only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to try to breeze through this so we have time for a few more questions. If you do default on your loan, so that means that your loan got transferred over to default resolution group. They're going to give you a 60-day window to resolve the default, either by starting a loan rehabilitation program or by starting the process of consolidating or just by starting to make regular payments. If you do that within that first 60-day window, they're not going to report the default to the credit bureaus, which is the really big whammy. They won't garnish your wages and they won't add collection costs. But the second you miss a payment after that, that's all bets are off. And that's only a one-time Hail Mary. Um, the loan, you still won't be eligible for any lower payment options, deferments, or any of that. But if you start a rehab program, which is where you make 9 consecutive on-time payments based on your income, and once you do that, they actually take the loan out of default altogether. But if you start that rehab program in that first 60 days, they won't report the actual default to your credit bureau. And they won't assign collection costs. Collection costs, by the way, are up to 24% of your balance. So if you default on $100,000 in loan, they can add $24,000 to your loan balance for defaulting. The other way out of default is by consolidating out of default. And that usually means, usually ask for a payment or two to show good faith. And then you fill out a consolidation application, and then the loan is out of default. We like rehab better because even though it takes longer, it has the lowest of collection costs. You'll only be charged up to 16% rather than the 24%. Excuse me, and it removes the default line from your credit report like it was never there. Consolidation will show that your loan is back in good standing, but it will still also show that it was in default at one point. And the collection costs are 18.5%, which is still lower than the 24% collection costs. If they do start garnishing your wages, they can garnish up to 15% of your income. They can also garnish up to 15% of your Social Security. Uh, they will take your tax refund. They can also take other federal payments. The federal government doesn't have to go to court to do that. As I mentioned, the ways out of default are pay the loan in full. Most people would not have defaulted in the first place if that was an option. Loan rehabilitation, consolidation, or if you happen to qualify for some type of loan discharge. As I mentioned, loan rehab, you make 9 consecutive on-time payments based on your income. They actually stop wage garnishment after payment 5, but they'll start it up again if you miss any other payments you still have to complete. You'll be able to get financial aid again after payment 6, but you'll lose it immediately again if you don't complete the rehab. I mentioned it reduces collection costs. Now, normally you can only do rehab once per loan. So if you rehab a loan, default again, you can't rehab again. But due to the budget reconciliation bill starting in 2027, people will be able to rehab a loan more than once, but hopefully they won't need that opportunity. I talked about consolidation. Discharges. Discharge means something bad happened to you. Not being able to afford your loan is not a reason for discharge, unfortunately. But if you become totally and permanently disabled, if you should pass away, if your school committed fraud regarding your program at your institution, for example, if they said that there was a job placement rate of 90% for your program and it turns out the job placement rate was only 20%, that could be a reason for borrower defense. Identity theft, meaning that you did not receive any benefits for the loan and someone actively forged your signature on the loan document. But again, so we hear a lot, my mom or dad forged my signature on my prom note. Can I file for ID theft discharge? The answer is usually no. Because if you receive benefit from the funds, meaning the funds were applied to pay your tuition, the regulations don't allow, in most cases, for ID theft discharge. You'd also have to get a court to find that your parent did commit the crime of identity theft. Ability to benefit is another type of discharge. The two most common reasons for that is you didn't have a high school diploma or the equivalent, and your school knew it when you took out the loans. Or if you had some sort of condition that would not have allowed you to benefit from the degree by under state law. So real life example, and the reason this rule exists is if you're legally blind and you go to truck driving school. You can't get a driver's license, never mind drive the big rigs, if you're legally blind. So if you were legally blind and your school knew it and gave you loans, you'd be able to get your loans discharged for that reason. If you had a felony, and or on the sex offender registry, for example, your state probably wouldn't allow you to work with children. So if you got a degree in, say, early childhood education, it's possible you could get a discharge if the school was aware that you were on the sex offender registry list. If you're in default and you want to get started on resolving it, the best way to get started is to go online and go to myeddebt.ed.gov to start the loan rehabilitation process and or the consolidation process or set up a payment plan. Or you could call the default resolution group at the number you see in front of you, or you can use good old-fashioned snail mail and mail them an inquiry to the address you see in front of you, which you can also find online at that same website. If you think the loan defaulted in error, you do have the right to appeal. Once the loan is out of default, you are again eligible for PSLF and lower payment options and so on. And any forgiveness counts that you may have had for PSLF will be reinstated. If you consolidate out of default, it will reset your income-driven plan count, however. You never have to pay a fee to get out of default. There's no like processing fee or anything like that. There's a collection cost that I mentioned before. But if anyone's saying we can get you out of default if you pay us $1,100, please don't. They can't do anything for you or do it any faster than you can do yourself, getting yourself out of default. Now, there's a myth out there that student loans can't be discharged in bankruptcy. They can. It's difficult, especially for federal loans, but it's not impossible. We don't have time to go over all the bells and whistles for that now, but if you go to our website, freestudentloanadvice.org, and look under bankruptcy, we explain what the courts look for discharging loans in bankruptcy. Couple tips. Consider getting on auto pay, then you won't forget your payment, and it also gets you a 1/4 point discount in your interest rate. Payments are always applied to collection costs first if you're in default, then interest that's accrued to date, then the money comes off the principal. People always ask, how can I make payments only to principal? You can't. You have to satisfy the interest that's accrued as of the date of your payment. I strongly advise that people make a plan on their student loans and then reevaluate their plan every year. Things can change. Your income may go up, it may go down. And it's always good to run the numbers again once a year to make sure that it might not be time to change strategies. I think tax time's a great time of year to do it, because you already have most of the stuff you need in front of you. And that's it. I know I ran a little over. I'm sorry. But I'm able to hang out for even a little bit longer if there's questions that people want to ask. I'll check in with Addison first.
Addison has been typing away feverishly, Betsy. He's incredible. So there were over 35, 36 questions.
He could do more than that. That's just a flesh wound. The term I use for Addison in a busy webinar is a beast. I've
Yeah,
seen hundreds.
wow, that's amazing. So I don't
Now
see
that we've
anything
made a blush, is there anything I should answer?
I don't think so. I think he's covered it. I think just to kind of reiterate what we've already shared in terms of the ongoing availability that your team offers through our partnership. So visiting fame at freestudentloanadvice.org, that's a direct email, direct pipeline to Betsy and the team. And they know when that email comes through, it's a main borrower, it's a fame partner. So they respond to those emails very, very quickly. So I'd recommend that you start there. Check out the new repayment page that we shared as well, because that kind of takes you through the steps. And then again, a recording of this webinar we will share. So you'll have all of this detail, you know, to review again if you so choose. So I think that's the best advice for today. I think taking action and asking for help is critical in all of this. There are solutions, there are supports available. It's when you don't ask and reach out that things get to be more difficult. So I
Yeah,
think,
and watch out for scams too.
yes,
I mean, as far
good,
as we're concerned, there's never a reason to pay for student loan help.
right.
Nobody can do anything for you that you can't do yourself or without asking for help from Fame or from us. Um, and a lot of the, not all, but a lot of them that do charge are actual outright scams.
Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Betsy. I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up.
Are you sure? Because Alice is coming.
Oh, yes.
Come
Well,
on, Alice, you're late. Come on.
we'll give her a minute.